Well, you've often heard of people say, oh, this is just my cross to bear. This is just, I've got to carry this cross. Well, I want to show you a little video this morning of a man who has taken this very literally. So we'll go ahead and go on to the video here and see this little CNN report. We can't live stream this out for everybody because of copyright reasons, but for those who are here, go ahead and take a look at this story. So he took very literally that call to carry the cross. Now, we use that term very freely. Oh, this is just my cross to bear. And we talk about that in terms of, I've got this medical problem in my body. I've got this financial hardship. There might be this difficult relationship in my family. Any number of things. We say, that's just your cross to bear. You just need to bear up under it. Well, today, what I'd like to do is we're going to go to Mark chapter 8. You can begin turning there in your Bibles. I do encourage you to have them open, and you'll see why later that it is very helpful to actually have a paper Bible open in front of you. But as we go into there, we're going to see where Jesus originally taught about the idea of carrying your cross. We're going to look at it and figure out what exactly did he mean by that, and then what do we need to do because of it. So, if you're in Mark chapter 8, we're going to listen in as Jesus shares with a crowd of people. Now, just a little bit of review here. The disciples, he had just told them that he was going to die. Remember that Peter had declared, you are the Christ. And then Jesus goes on to explain what does the Christ, being the Christ mean is that he is, as the Messiah, he's going to suffer and die. He's going to be mistreated. And he's going to rise from the dead 3 days later. And Peter rebukes him and said, no, this is not going to happen. You're not going to die. And Jesus says to him, get behind me, Satan, because you don't have in mind God's interests, but man's interests. And now he's going to go on, and he calls not only the disciples to him, but the crowd, and he explains, well, because this is the kind of Messiah I am, and what this Messiah is going to do, this is what it means to be a follower of that kind of Messiah. So let's look now at Mark chapter 8, and let's get to the right page in my Bible. There we go, Mark chapter 8, and we're going to start in verse 34. And he summoned the crowd with his disciples and said to them, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Now, we're going to look at this verse here for some insights that are in there that we might miss. Particularly, we're going to look at some cultural insight and also some linguistic insight. Things that might not be apparent to us as North American English-speaking Christians. Okay? So, first of all, let's start with the cultural. There are two walks that are talked about in here. The first is the walk of discipleship. The term come after or follow is a term that you may recognize from earlier on in the gospel where Jesus calls his followers. He goes, to the side of the Sea of Galilee, sees some guys, and says, come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. That is an invitation, not just to take a walk. This is an invitation to change a life. I'm inviting you to follow after me as my disciples, to commit yourself to being with me day in, day out, and learn from me what it means to be like me. That's what a discipleship-rabbi relationship was. The rabbi was not just teaching them to know what he knows, or even just to do what he does, but to be who he is. And so he was saying, come follow after me so that you can be like me. That's the walk of discipleship. But it is also a walk of death. A walk of death. Because if a rabbi was to do something, then the disciples need to do it as well. I talked with Rabbi Chad Foster, who is he's actually a pastor at St. Peter's Lutheran Church here in town, but he's also a Jewish rabbi. And he was explaining to me about this. He said, so if you are the disciple and your rabbi is walking up the hill and he picks up a rock, he doesn't even necessarily tell you to pick up a rock, you just pick up a rock too. And so you walk up the hill, and then when he gets to the top, he may be explaining something about that rock. And so you all have your rocks as well. You watch what your rabbi does. You do what your rabbi does. You go where your rabbi goes. So if your rabbi picks up something and carries it, what do? You pick up something and carry it too. If your rabbi picks up a cross and carries it, what do? You pick up a cross and you carry it as well. On the same path, on the hill towards the place of execution. It is a walk of death if you are going to do that. So to take up your cross does not just mean about dying. It is about submitting. This is another one of these cultural insights, and I didn't realize this until this week, that when Rome would execute somebody, they weren't just, when they executed them by crucifixion, they were not just seeking to kill the person. If they were going to do that, they could just chop off their head in prison, right? Like happened with John the Baptist. If they crucified someone, this was making a statement. This was making a point. The person would be forced to carry the cross beam. Now, this guy on the video here, he was carrying an entire cross, the upright part and the horizontal part. When Rome would execute somebody, they had to carry the horizontal part, which would later be affixed to a post in the ground, which would form what we call the cross. So carry your cross meant just the cross beam. But the person was forced to carry that to make a statement. It was forcing that person to show publicly that they were submitting, to demonstrate publicly one's submission to the authority against which he had previously rebelled. That's what I found in one of the commentaries. I thought it was a really good explanation. By carrying that cross out publicly, you are stating, I'm submitting. I am giving up. Rome's in charge. I'm not. So it is a statement of submission. First century Roman executions, when they would make that point, there was one particular road in Rome. It's called the Appian Way. And there was one time when a rebel against the Roman government had been captured and killed. And so he, and I think it was 3,000 of his followers, were crucified all along this road. And that road is about the distance from here to Lafayette. So think of them as mile markers along the way to show, as you travel that road, a reminder, you don't cross Rome. Rome's in charge. Everybody submits to Rome. So to take up your cross is a statement of full submission, even to the point of death. So when Jesus says, take up the cross, take up your cross, are you willing to do that? Are you willing to take up your cross, make a full surrender, and to show it publicly before other people? Now, before you answer that question, are you willing? Before you answer that, let's get into the linguistic insight as well. Okay, so on this verse, there are 3 requirements. Deny yourself, take up your cross, follow me, or follow Jesus. Now, when we look at those look basically the same to me. But there is a difference, a nuance in the Greek language that may not come through. The first 2 is different from the last. Deny yourself and take up your cross is in a tense. It's called the aorist tense, but it means it's a point-in-time thing that is done. And it implies here, if I understand correctly, a decisive action. So you deny yourself, over and done with. You take up your cross, over and done with. And then follow me is a continual action. It's in the present tense. It means to repeatedly or continually follow. So there's this challenge here. I need to make a decision that I am going to deny myself. I'm giving up my rights. I am surrendering. Closest illustration I can think of it is when you enroll or you enlist in the military. It's like you give up your rights. They tell you what to do. They tell you where to go, how high to jump and when you can come down. I mean, it's all right there. Yes, sir, is the only answer. So you give up all of your rights. Deny yourself. When you decide to follow Jesus, you are giving up all your rights. It is all about what he says you should do, not about what you want to do. Deny yourself. Take up your cross. When a person took up their cross, this was not a repeated action. You take up your cross, and then you are walking on a one-way street. There is no going back. If you are walking the road carrying that cross, you know you're only going in one direction, and when you get there, you're not coming back. You're not returning. There's no coming back this way. So when you take up your cross, it is a decision. It is a commitment. It is final. There is no going back. If you're going to come after Jesus, it is a full, irrevocable, irreversible, unconditional surrender. I'm going, and I'm going that one direction. I'm not going back again. So before we make that decision, we need to decide, am I taking up the cross? Now, if you look in Luke's rendition of this, he adds one word to this. It's in Luke chapter 9, verse 23. And he says that you deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and follow me. So that does seem to mean that it is a repeated action, right? So how do we resolve those two? Well, those words that he uses, deny yourself, take up your cross, the same kind of word that Mark used. It is decisive, once, over and done with. But you have made the decision that I am taking up that cross daily. Every single day when you wake up, I'm picking up the cross again. My journey's not over. I got to the end of yesterday, and I laid down to sleep. But the cross is right there with me. And so when I get up the next day, I'm taking up my cross again, and I'm going all the way until the time that God calls me home. It is a one-time, irrevocable, irreversible, unconditional surrender to do it every day. And he says, unless you're going to do this, you cannot be my disciple. You cannot be my follower if you are not going to do this. So let me ask you this question. Many of us, I think all of us present here, would say, I am a Christian. Are you a disciple? I am a Christian, but according to the definition that he has given us here, are you a disciple? Have you taken up the cross? Have you denied yourself, and are you following daily? I can't, there's no reverse on this. It's one direction that I'm going. If not, if you have never made that decision, then make today the day you say, you know what, I don't want to just wear the name Christian. I want to wear the name disciple. I am going to surrender today. I'm going to give it all up. No going back. Make today the day that you become a disciple if you are not already. Now, this is a very, very important decision that we make. Are we willing to take up that cross and do that surrender? But Jesus, and this is why I want you to have your Bibles handy. I want you to look at the text in your Bible, because I can't put this much up on the screen and still have it be big enough for you guys to read it. Look at the next 4 verses. What is the word that starts each of those next 4 verses? It is the word for, F-O-R, for. And so he says in verse 34 that this is what it means to be a disciple. And then in the next 4 verses, he gives reason after reason after reason after reason of what this means. What is the significance of this? Like in a courtroom, okay? Lawyer gets up, he makes his case, and then he says, now I'm going to present you evidence, Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C, down the line of this is all the reason why what I just told you is true. That's what Jesus is doing here. He's going to give us 4 different reasons. Now, the first 3 can kind of be grouped together because they're all making the same point, and that is the fact that there is a soul to save. There is a soul to save. So let's look at verses 35 through 37. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what will a man give in exchange for his soul? Okay? So there are these 3 reasons. Now, let's take these one at a time. The first reason here is that you need to, is about the securing of your assets. Okay? Or specifically one asset. One thing that you have, and you need to make sure it's secure. When I was meeting with an insurance person to kind of set up some life insurance, he explained it this way. You've got all of your possessions, your property, all the things that are of value to you, and insurance is just like putting a fence around all that. It's to protect it from getting harmed or getting taken away from you, right? And so what do we need to do to secure this asset? Well, what's the asset that we have? You saw it come up in each of those verses, each of those 3 verses, although you may not know that it's the same thing. You know, what will a man give in exchange for his soul? What's the value of a soul? It doesn't gain the whole world and forfeit your soul. But that is the exact same word as the one that is translated life in verse 35. When it says that if anyone wishes to come after me, whoever loses his life, that's actually the word soul. Whoever loses his soul for my sake and the gospel's will save it. Your soul. Your life. From the Hebrew perspective, this was not like, I've got my immaterial, invisible soul inside of me. That's the part that lives on. And my life here on earth is something completely different than that. It's kind of all lumped together. Your soul. What is the value of your soul? Well, it's an asset that needs to be protected. Because you are not strong enough or smart enough or have enough foresight to be able to protect your own soul. To be able to protect your own life. We've all tried to do that, where we're like, I think I know what's going to keep me safe, and then it ends up falling to pieces. And things go by the wayside. Things unravel on us. When my kids were small, I remember this specifically with Elizabeth when she was real tiny. And we have, our basement is finished, but the stairs are not carpeted on the way down there, okay? And so the stairs have that little metal guard on the lip of each step, right? And it's just hard wood. And so when she was just real tiny and we're walking down the stairs, I would insist, you got to hold my hand. Hold Daddy's hand as we're going down there. And so what she wanted to do is she wanted to take her little hand and hold on to me. Okay, well, I knew that if she tripped and stumbled, what was going to happen? Her grip was going to pop right off there, and she was going to go tumbling down the stairs. And so I had to explain, is when I said hold my hand, what I really meant is that I need to hold your hand. So she'd take her tiny little hand and put it in my large hand, and I would hold on to her. So if she fell, she was secure. When it comes to following God and keeping your life safe, it's not about the strength of your grip. It's about whose grip you are in. And if you are in God's grip, He is strong enough. You cannot be strong enough to keep yourself from falling. You cannot be smart enough to keep yourself from losing. You cannot be alert enough to keep yourself from an accident. You cannot do that. It's impossible for us to juggle all of the variables and all the strength. And so what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we open our hands and surrender and just reach out and let God take a hold of our hand. He will hold you securely. Put your life where it is most secure. Now, that's the first reason, okay, because there's an asset that needs to be secured. The second is because it's very possible to make a bad investment. The second reason here, you guys have seen where, what are you supposed to do in the stock market, okay, or with gold or silver? Buy low and sell high, right? So buy it when it's cheap, sell it when it's high. And so I can watch all those little graphs up and down and think, okay, now's the time. And I buy it, and then suddenly the bottom goes out of it, right? You invest in a startup business, or it might even be something as simple as a car. Man, this thing looked great, and I bought it, and then a month later the transmission goes out on it, or the timing belt goes out. It's like, man, I made a bad investment, because what you thought was secure, what you thought had promise, doesn't pan out. But it's not just about financial investments. You could go plant a garden or sow a field with your crop, and then what happens? The weather turns, gets real dry. You get beetles and bugs and other things that come in and destroy it. You might invest yourself not in a garden, but you might invest yourself in growing a person. I'm invested in this relationship, and then the relationship falls to pieces. Any number of things that we can invest ourselves in that prove to be in bad investment. They can quickly burst, just like you guys have heard of like bubbles, real estate bubble, right? Okay, it looks like everything's going great, and all of a sudden the bottom falls out of it. Or back in the 90s, the dot-com bubble that happened with all those tech companies coming. Okay, all I have to do is mention 3 letters, and you know exactly how that works out. AOL, right? How many people use AOL anymore? No. It was great for a while, and then it collapsed. All of these things that show promise are not going to pan out. You can gain the whole world, all the stuff of this world, but the problem is this world is passing away and everything that belongs to it. You can gain the whole world, but how's it going to help your soul? Our souls are going to carry on into eternity. So if I focus on the world and neglect my soul, it doesn't profit me anything because it is not a good long-term investment. Our soul is. Jesus puts it even clearer for us in verse 37. For what will a man give in exchange for his soul? You invest in a stock, you invest in something else, and what sets the price for those things? Supply and demand, right? Now, even if you're not an investor, if anybody likes seafood, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You go to Red Lobster and you open up the menu. A lot of those dishes in there have a particular price. You want the cod, you want the shrimp, and it tells you, okay, it's $11.99 or $13.99 or whatever. What does it say beside lobster? Market price. What does that mean? Sometimes people catch a lot of lobsters. Price goes down. Sometimes people catch few lobsters. Price goes up. It's all about supply and demand. In an auction, okay, you might find a beautiful antique dresser in an auction, and you can get that thing for $10. Unless there's somebody else that sees that it's a beautiful antique dresser too, and then suddenly back and forth, and that price can go up really, really high. Most people don't find instruction manuals to be very compelling reads, right? I heard this week about an instruction manual that went for a pretty high price at an auction, over $700,000. Okay, why? Well, it was actually for one of the oldest Apple computers available. Still, why would somebody pay $700,000 for that? Because Steve Jobs had handwritten some notes in it. And so suddenly, this thing, became valuable to people enough that they would bid their way up to over $700,000 for that. To me, that seems absolutely ridiculous. But for them, it was valuable. It's all about the supply and demand. How much are you willing to pay? How does the value change, though, if it is a life and death situation? So how much is a bottle of water worth? Okay? Danny, you often go out and buy the water that we have here at church, and you can get a big pack of that water. It's not very expensive. But what happens if you go to the Indianapolis 500? How much are those bottles of water worth then? On this hot day, right? The price goes up. What if you have a person who has just hiked for 2 days and has no water through Death Valley? That water is suddenly very, very valuable. What would they pay if they thought that water is going to save my life? Okay? If I have a life jacket, I might be able to buy a life jacket for 10 or 20 bucks, right? But if there's a flood that's happening, storm surge down in Louisiana, and people are afraid they're on top of the house and they're going to get washed away, what are they going to do? When you come by in a boat and you say, hey, I got this life jacket. One person on this house is saying, I'll give you $10,000 for that. Another person is saying, I'll give you $20,000 for that. The price goes up because it's a life and death situation. What if you're in Kabul, Afghanistan, right now, and it is the 29th? Last flight's out, potentially on the 31st. How much would you pay for a flight out of Kabul right now? Because it's a life and death situation. I might be a millionaire, but if I'm stuck in Afghanistan, what good is that going to do me when I'm dead with a bullet through the head because of the Taliban? I will surrender all that I have if it is going to save my life. What about your soul? How much will you surrender for the value of your soul? Because all that stuff is not going to do you a lick of good when this world passes away. Are you willing to suffer the carrying of a cross for the temporary time of this life in order to secure your soul for all of eternity? So those are the first three arguments. We've got the securing of the asset and the investment, and then the market price. But there's one more reason that Jesus gives here, and that's because that there is also in verse 38 a name to claim. A name to claim. Read that for you. For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with his holy angels. There is a time coming when Jesus is going to come back, and he is going to claim all those who belong to him. Now, how does he determine that based on this verse? The ones that he claims are the ones that claim him. The ones who say, I belong to Jesus. Now, this may seem a little bit remote for us, because in this country it's a little different than it is in some other places. I've got right here my driver's license. Okay, and on there it's got my name, date of birth, height, weight, eye color, all that kind of stuff. But if you were to have your ID card in some other countries, it's also got something else on there. Religious affiliation. That's the case in Afghanistan right now. And so people have had to choose, am I going to put down there Islam? That's my connection. Or are they going to put down, I'm a Christian? Because right now, if you have to show your ID to get through a checkpoint, everybody's going to know, do you belong to Jesus or not? Am I willing to wear the name? Am I willing to claim the name of Jesus? Puts it in a whole different light, doesn't it? If we think here, there has been some persecution. Some people may not have a job opportunity. Some people may not be able to serve in a particular place of public office because some people don't like the fact that they're a Christian. We're not suffering like they are in other countries. But the time may come. The time may come. Are you willing to carry the cross? I've made an unconditional surrender, and as a part of that, I'm putting the name Christian here. I'm tattooing it on my arm. I am showing everybody I'm a Christian. Irrevocable, irreversible, not going back. I belong to Jesus because I want him to claim me when he comes. I don't want him to be ashamed of me. Now in Afghanistan right now, it's costly. I heard about one Christian that he was, the family was together, and the uncle in this family the family refused to recant and say, okay, well, we're going to give up on our Christianity, so they skinned the guy alive and hung him on a pole in front of his family. It's costly to carry your cross. Many of us may not face that, but it really doesn't matter. We don't have to know what's coming when we pick up the cross. When we pick up the cross, we know it is until death do I part from this life. Regardless of how that comes, I'm going to deny myself. I'm not going to take up my cross because it is worth it. It is worth it. Now, there's one person that I want to leave you with today who decided it was worth it. There's a picture of a guy named Jim. Now, Jim was a person who was very talented, very able, but he heard the call of the Lord and felt the tug on his heart that I need to go to the unreached, the people who have never heard of Jesus. And so he, along with some other missionaries, decided in Ecuador they were going to try and reach a particular tribe. Now, this tribe was called the Auca by outsiders. It meant savages. I think Wairani was actually the name of the tribe, according to the people within the tribe. And so there was a pilot in their group, and there were some other missionaries, and so they made contact with these people by flying over and dropping gifts and lowering things down in a bucket. Even had like a telephone connection there so that they could hear them, they could talk to them, not that they could understand each other necessarily. And so they were reaching out, and eventually they found this spot along the river near where this tribe was. And the missionaries nicknamed it Palm Beach. There's a sandy bank. And so they flew in this little yellow aircraft in there, and they would get out, and eventually they were able to make face-to-face contact with this native tribe that had never heard the gospel. And so they started to interact with them. Well, eventually one of the guys in the tribe told a lie about the missionaries, and it got the other tribesmen kind of riled up, and they came and they speared to death those 5 missionaries. But in Jim's journal entry, let's go ahead and put that quote up there. In Jim's journal entry, he said, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. What will a man give in exchange for his soul? Will he surrender and give it up?" I want to close today a little differently than we usually do. Normally, the worship team would come up and would lead us in a closing song. I want to play a song for you that is also going to have some video with it. Clips from the life of Jim Elliot and their efforts there, as well as you're going to hear in the song and see some clips about some other believers, particularly Eric Little, if you guys have seen the movie Chariots of Fire, Olympic athlete, who set aside his fame to go as a missionary to Japan. And then you'll see some other people as well. Listen to the words of this song that's based on Jim's quote here, and think about what they gave up, but how worth it was. And be asking the Lord some questions. Lord, what do you want me to give up? What does it mean for me to carry my cross? And to say, I'm leaving it all behind to follow you. And then I'll have just a couple of closing comments and a prayer after we're done. Now, for those who are watching on the live stream, we're going to have to, we can't live stream this because of copyright reasons. But listen to the song, "He Is No Fool" by Twyla Paris. To finish out a little bit of the story of Jim Elliot and his fellow missionaries, after he and those other 4 were killed, Jim's widow went back to that tribe along with their child. And Nate Saint, who was the pilot, his sister went there as well. And they were able to lead to Christ a number of people, including the ones who had killed their loved ones. And now there is a thriving church among the Wairani people. And as a matter of fact, Nate Saint came one time to the school where Amanda and I went, and he brought with him Min Kai, one of the Palm Beach killers, who is now a believer and is a missionary. They pack up a dental chair, foldable, collapsible dental chair on their back. They've taught them dentistry, and now they go out to other tribes to serve those tribes and to share with them the gospel. So as you consider the cross that is there before you, and I'm not talking about Jesus' cross, I'm talking about the cross beam. And Jesus is saying, will you follow me? Will you pick it up? Will you deny yourself? Will you come after me all the way till the end? Most of us are not going to face what Nate and Jim and these others faced. But we carry it all the way until, regardless of the means, God calls us home. Will you take up the cross, deny yourself today, and say, I'm following all the way till the end? Let's pray. Lord, I am thankful that there is nothing that we can endure here that compares with what Jesus endured for us. Because he endured not only the physical death on a cross, he endured the separation from you that all is due to all of us. Thank you that he endured that. And I pray, Father, that we would realize that you are not inviting us to make a sacrifice. You are inviting us to make an investment that is going to pay eternal dividends, that is sure and secured and is unshakable. You are saying, surrender your life, because you can't keep it anyways. Give it to me, and it will be secure for all of eternity. So, Father, I pray that we would count the cost, we would live it well, and we, as the Bethel Church family, and anybody else who this message encounters, Lord, that we would be marching after you, gladly carrying our cross, knowing that it is a blessing and it is worth it. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, well, next week we're going to go ahead and continue on into Mark chapter 9. You can begin reading there. Make it a great week of carrying your cross and following the Lord. See you again soon.